where we're going as we address this crisis. Now, there are some things we know for sure, and it's also important to acknowledge that. One thing we know for sure is it is going to be a hot summer, and that is going to come with its own host of challenges. We know, unfortunately, because first of all, we experienced last year was a really intense summer. And we know because of the projections we've received already from the National Weather Service that this summer will be at least as bad. So our job is to take that knowledge and do something with it, get ahead of it. And the heat has certainly arrived. We're in the high 80s projected today, in the 90s next week. Our job, of course, is to keep New Yorkers cool, keep New Yorkers safe, to make sure we focus on those who have the greatest challenges, our seniors in particular. Folks with healthcare challenges, our kids, families that don't have a lot of other options. Our job is to do something for all of them, keep them safe, keep them cool. And we have a great initiative, Cool It NYC, that is going to be pivotal to keeping people cool this summer. Now, one piece of this initiative, central priority has been to make sure that we are there in every community with the kinds of solutions that help each community, particularly the communities that have been hardest hit by the coronavirus. And in particular, again, our seniors, protecting our seniors is crucial, and that's why we made the decision to give out free air conditioning units to low-income seniors, to help them, the folks who had to stay home for their own safety but needed to be cool. Let me give you the latest on that. As of last night, 34,294 air conditioning units have been installed since we started this initiative just a few weeks ago, and we're going to keep going. A lot more are coming to help our seniors. Now, that's about indoor. We have to keep people cool indoors. We have to give outdoor options. We just have to do everything we can to keep people cool this summer. And a lot of city agencies are working hard at this. Emergency management, parks, environmental protection, FDNY. Everyone has a common cause to make sure New Yorkers are safe. And we understand we have to do this in a way that recognizes the other realities we're facing, the social distancing and the other needs that we have to take into account to keep people safe from the virus. But again, the central focus will be on health and safety, particularly for the communities hardest hit by the disease. And here to tell you more about it, and she has been a stalwart throughout this crisis, her and her team at Emergency Management, for the last 4 months have fought so hard to keep New Yorkers safe in the middle of this unprecedented crisis. Let me turn to our Emergency Management Commissioner, Deanne Criswell.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everybody. It is summertime and temperatures are going to continue to go up. And while the National Weather Service has canceled their heat advisory for today, we remain ready to support New Yorkers as the heat does go up. To help New Yorkers beat the heat this year, the city has implemented a number of measures through the Cool It NYC measure that the mayor talked about and our new Cool Streets initiative. Our cooling options have been adapted this year as a result of COVID-19, and our goal is to ensure that all New Yorkers that live in heat-burdened areas, heat-burdened communities, are within a quarter mile of any outdoor cooling element. This is going to be done through a combination of cooling options. First are our cooling centers. We will open cooling centers this year, as we have in the past, but they are going to be different. The city will open cooling centers in all 5 boroughs. We have identified schools, community centers, and other nonprofit organizations that have offered up space. We have 145 that are prepared to open right now if needed, and this number is going to continue to go up throughout the summer. As the city continues to respond to COVID-19, we have made additional changes. We've implemented additional guidelines to ensure the safety of any New Yorker who visits a cooling center to seek relief from the heat. This includes face coverings that must be worn at all times inside cooling centers. Cooling centers will also operate at a limited capacity so we can maintain social distancing guidelines of 6 feet. We will also provide face coverings and cleaning supplies to all centers so we, again, can ensure for the safety of all New Yorkers that need to find a place to relieve themselves from the heat. We will also activate new cooling and misting locations in heat-burdened communities. New Yorkers can find relief from the heat in the 650 spray showers located already in city parks in areas with ample tree canopies where temperatures can be 20 degrees cooler. These locations are always operational and can be found in the parks website at nyc.gov/parks. The city also recently unveiled the first set of cool streets for this summer, announcing expanded cooling options on existing open streets in the most heat-burdened parts of New York City. These streets will be part of the Open Streets network and will, when activated, can also be found on the parks website. And as always, during heat emergencies, the Department of Environmental Protection and FDNY will proactively install more than 300 spray caps on showers within these heat-burdened neighborhoods. As we head into the heat of summer, we are prepared to support all New Yorkers who need relief from the hot weather. As always, I want to remind everybody to check on your neighbors, to check on your loved ones, to be a buddy, especially those that are the most vulnerable to heat as well as the COVID-19 virus. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Deanne. Appreciate that very much. So that's the challenge of the heat. Now let's go back to the challenge we've been facing together these months, the virus itself. Now look, every one of us is looking at what's happening around the rest of the country, and it is scary, let's be honest, to see the kind of resurgence that we've seen in so many states. It gives you a lot of pause about where we are going, all of us, in the future. And we do see that a number of cities and states, unfortunately, are going in the wrong direction. And we know in some cases it's because they didn't focus on the data and take some of the precautions they might have. And we have to learn from their example and constantly watch, constantly learn, make sure we do not slip up and we keep the progress that we have sustained now for many weeks. So a lot to do, and always staying tough, staying disciplined, doubling down on the things that have been working here in New York City. So one of the things that's working, and one of the things that we have on a scale far beyond what any other part of the country has, is our Test and Trace Corps. It's an extraordinary operation now, many thousands of professionals out there following up on every lead, making sure people are safe, making sure they safely separate. If they need support, they get it. This is a big positive X factor for New York City, that we have this aggressive apparatus out there protecting people, and it's growing. But look, there's so much to do to make sure that people get tested, because the Test and Trace Corps works best when more and more people are getting tested. So more testing sites are being established all the time. 2 new pop-up sites in Red Hook, Brooklyn, and Co-op City in the Bronx. A new testing van in Manhattan. We now have over 200 sites where New Yorkers can get tested, and we're going to keep adding to that. Now, this week we have a particular goal. We want to get 150,000 New Yorkers tested this week. And we want to encourage everyone, if you've been putting it off, this is a great time to get tested. If you were tested a long time ago, it's a great time to get tested. Let's really speed this up for the good of all. So if you need to know where, text the words COVID test to 85548, and you can get the right location for you. Now, the testing sites are crucial. The Test and Trace Corps is crucial, but the idea is to get deeper and deeper into communities, to educate people, to involve them, to make it easier for them to get the information they know, to get the testing, to know what to do if they test positive or if they're symptomatic. And that means finding more and more grassroots partners, finding organizations that are trusted in communities, have a lot of reach, a lot of connection, that people will listen to. Helping to lead this effort is a public servant who has done so much for this city for a long time, serving the people of the Bronx and fighting for equity and fairness for them, and doing great work helping those who are among the least fortunate New Yorkers, our homeless New Yorkers, and now as the Chief Equity Officer for the Test and Trace Corps. She's doing fantastic work to get this effort deeper and deeper into our communities. My pleasure to introduce Annabelle Palma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, and thank you for reminding us that we had a great day yesterday during our Get Tested Day of Action. We had many volunteers come out, and it was amazing to see our community partners, our faith leaders, our local elected officials, but most importantly, our residents from the community helping us spread the word to make sure that individuals know that they can get a free COVID test at over 200 sites throughout the city. And it was just it was just energizing. And this morning I woke up and I said we need to definitely continue to do this. The volunteers continue to call to make sure that there will be more days of actions. As Chief Equity Officer for Test and Trace, my job is to fight the disparities that this pandemic has caused to our city. And so by doing that, we need to make sure we engage communities who have been disproportionately affected by the virus. And I know this work all too well because it was work that I did as a certified nursing assistant when I worked in a nursing home and had to take care of my patients to keep them safe. I also represented over 100,000 members of 1199 as a healthcare worker and trained them in health and safety trainings to make sure that their workplaces were also safe and that that their environments and their management were adhering to their concerns. I served my community for 14 years as a council member, and I'm very proud of the work that we did as a city to make sure that the community I represented was able to get the resources that they needed. And those communities that I represented, that I had the privilege and honor to represent, are the communities that have been hardest hit by COVID. And so I know the value of working with partners who know those communities inside and out. And this work we cannot do without them. And so it is, again, humbling and a privilege to now be working at this capacity with those partners to make sure that we can get New York back on its feet, that we can reopen New York safely, and that individuals know the importance of testing for COVID-19 and keeping themselves safe and their loved ones safe. And so today I want to tell you about 2 important ways that Test and Trace Corps is putting down roots and beginning to grow in our communities. Both of these efforts are possible because of our strong partnership with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Recognizing the crucial role of community-based organizations play in the lives of New York's health and hospitals, in collaboration with the Health Department, is making available $10 million in grants to be awarded to more than 20 community-based organizations to support the test and trace efforts that have been going on. These grants will enable the groups that receive them to educate New Yorkers on the importance of getting tested for COVID and engaging with contact tracers. The work will cover things like how to get tested, answering the call to provide confidential information to a contact tracer once a contact tracer calls them on the phone or knocks on their door, the need to safely separate from loved ones to stop the spread of the virus, and the guidance around precautions like social distancing, continuing to wear mask coverings, and safely reopening practices. The grant will run from July through November in amounts ranging from $50,000 to $750,000, depending on the reach and size of the awarded of the organization and the proposals that they submit. Starting this week, in partnership with the Department of Health, we are launching a new hyperlocal response to prevent the spread at the grassroots level. And this is extremely important because this will allow us to engage more New Yorkers and educate them about the importance of getting tested. With this effort, the city will pour resources and support services into neighborhoods where data shows there are low testing rates and high percentage of positive tests. And one of the communities that I was able to work out of yesterday is one of those communities. A lot of people were afraid to get tested, predominantly because of their immigration status. And we want to make sure that people understand that this program has nothing to do with your immigration status, but everything to do with the health and safety of yourself and your loved ones. The goal is to lower transmission with increased testing and wraparound services, using intense community engagement, public messaging, and working with the trusted local partners who know these communities and the community trusts what education and what message they bring to them. The first neighborhood we are focusing on is Tremont in the Bronx, AKA zip code 10457. In picking this zip code to start, we looked at all our data and made the decision based on 3 factors. And these factors were testing is low, but the percentage positive is higher than city average. where we are seeing cases that are actively symptomatic, but people are not coming out to get tested, which signals current spread, and where we have been persistently high burden over the course of the pandemic. Our goal is to break that chain of transmission and get every New Yorker tested. We aim to test at least 2,500 people in this zip code in the next 2 weeks, and immediately connect those who test positive with services to support their safe separation from their loved ones. And I know that this may be scary to a lot of people, but this is the best way to stop the spread of the virus. Whether you safely separate at home or at a free hotel offered by the Test and Trace Corps. We will evaluate our performance in this zip code 10457 and use it to inform our response in other neighborhoods that may be facing the same situations. Starting this week, we are bringing rapid point-of-care testing to Tremont. Testing results will be available in 15 minutes with resource navigators on site and ready to assist people with support, including a free hotel room if needed to safely separate from loved ones. We are also including 3 new mobile testing sites at the location. You see these listed on the slides. Bringing more testing to the communities with greatest need is how we can prevent the resurgence of COVID and protect the most vulnerable. This is an urgent mission as we see how the virus is raging in other parts of the country, as our mayor has highlighted, and there is no vaccine or no cure on the horizon yet. We still have a long road to go, but today, and working together, we are making great progress, and I am happy to be part of the work that's being done, and I'm truly humbled by the mayor allowing me to be part of this team to make sure that New York can safely reopen again.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Annabelle, and we can hear the passion in your voice for this work and appreciate it deeply, and it really is about getting to the grassroots. That's where we're going to make the highest impact, and this new initiative is going to help us do it. And now, since everything is about the data and the numbers and being led by the science, let's talk about our daily indicators. Indicator number 1, daily number of people admitted to hospitals for suspected COVID-19. Threshold is 200. Today's report is 69 patients. Number 2, daily number of people in health and hospitals ICUs. Threshold 375. Today's report 289 patients. And most importantly, percentage of people tested citywide positive for COVID-19. Threshold 15%. Today, again, a very good number, 2%. We say a few words in Spanish. Este verano, los neoyorquinos vamos a enfrentar a otros enemigos, el calor y la humedad peligrosa. Pero tal como hemos hecho durante esta crisis, vamos a proteger a los más vulnerables para mantenerlos seguros y fuera del calor. Juntos vamos a encontrar la manera de disfrutar este verano mientras seguimos luchando contra el virus. With that, let's turn to our colleagues in the media. Please let me know the name and outlet of each journalist.
Hi all, just a reminder that we have with us today Emergency Management Commissioner Criswell, Executive Director of Test and Trace, Dr. Long, Chief Equity Officer of the Test and Trace Program, Palma, and Senior Advisor, Dr. Varma. With that, we'll start with Bridget from WNYC.
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, Bridget.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to follow up on some of the education announcements from this week first. I understand the DOE is developing a plan for testing protocols for schools this fall. Maybe Dr. Long can contribute to this answer. I'm wondering what the plan is if a student or staff member tests positive. Does it mean the school shuts down, or do classroom communities need to be quarantined? That's my first question.
Yeah, Bridget, I'll start. Actually, Dr. Varma would be important to this answer too. Look, we're doing each step rapidly here because we've got 2 months until school begins, and on one hand, that's a long time. A lot can happen in the next 2 months and could affect our approach. On the other hand, in planning terms, 2 months is real soon, so we're working real hard right now. We are determining right now what those testing protocols should be. We don't have a final answer for you, but we'll have more to say in the coming days on this. It's a different situation than what we faced before. In March, we were in the very beginning of this crisis. We now have a very different reality in the city. We also have a whole new reality with the Test and Trace Corps being available to us. So I don't want you to assume it's the same standards or same approach as in March. We also have a lot to talk through with the state about the right way to do this safely. But the bottom line here is health and safety first. We know the vast majority of parents want their kids to be back in school, want to resume their kids' education, but we are only going to do things that we are convinced are safe and are in the name of the health of everyone in the school building. So a lot to work through. We'll have more to say soon. Let me just see if Jay Varma wants to add anything. If he's out there. Jay?
Yep, thank you. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. No, I concur with everything the mayor said about the real difference between the situation now and the situation back in March. The plan for the schools is going to be a data-driven approach, and it's going to be done on a case-by-case basis. So again, we're working out all of the details, but we don't anticipate the need for the same type of widespread closure that happened before, unless the data actually dictates that. So again, the strategy is going to be based on what do we know about the specific incident, the characteristics of the people, the exposures, the test results, and then make plans and responses based on that.
Go ahead, Bridget.
Great. And so my second question, state lawmakers are going to be returning to Albany for a session later this month, and one of the bills they're considering would give the city of Buffalo the authority to require police officers to be residents of that city. Is that legislation something you would consider? Would you require NYPD members to live here in the city?
Thank you, Bridget. Look, this is a really important issue. It's actually been discussed over decades in this city. Let's talk about where we stand to begin with. Most New Yorkers, I'm not sure, still know the basic facts of today's NYPD. Today's NYPD is majority people of color. Today's NYPD is almost half New York City residents. That has changed a lot in recent years, and it's been a focus of this administration to make the NYPD look more like New York City and be more like New York City. But that said, a lot of NYPD officers who come from New York City, a lot of NYPD officers who happen to be people of color, are living in the suburbs for purely economic reasons because they can't find enough affordable housing here. So we have to be really smart about balancing the factors. I think the more officers who live in the city, the better. The more officers who grew up in the city, the better. But we also have to recognize the economic reality. So I definitely think this is an issue. We should not only engage it, we should have a real public debate about it, but we should be mindful that it's not as easy an equation in New York City as in a lot of other places because of the pure cost of housing and cost of living here.
Next, we have Marcia from CBS.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder what your reaction is to the report by the Attorney General calling on a separate commission to be appointed to control the NYPD and also to appoint its commissioner, in effect, taking the authority away from the mayor's office. Your feelings?
Thank you, Marcia. It's such an important issue. Well, first of all, I thank the Attorney General for doing an investigation, which was obviously focused first and foremost on the days when the protests were occurring and how the NYPD comported itself during that time. And the Attorney General did an important review and came forward with a number of ideas, and I appreciate that. I'll be looking at it very carefully, and we'll follow up with the Attorney General on that. In terms of that particular proposal, I don't think it'll work. I think it would be counterproductive because, look, think about what we've been able to do in recent years. We ended stop and frisk, we instituted neighborhood policing, we reduced arrests radically while still making the city safe, 180,000 fewer arrests in 2019 than the last year of Bloomberg. We reduced mass incarceration, it's about a third of what it was when I came into office. We instituted body cameras on all patrol officers, de-escalation training for every member of the police force, implicit bias training. You know, there's so many reforms I could go through. We were able to do them very quickly, even recently. The decision by Commissioner Shea, recognizing that the anti-crime unit caused a certain number of challenges for communities, and there was a better way to do things. He was able to take that action very quickly with my agreement. And that is the kind of thing that happens when there's unity of command and the ability to have true accountability. My accountability is to the people. When you create any kind of commission, when you create diffusion of accountability, things don't work. We've seen it over and over again. I could give you plenty of examples, and you know some of them very well, Marcia. We all remember what the Board of Education used to be like versus the power of mayoral accountability, the ability to actually move things quickly in our schools. We all understand the problems we see at any agency that doesn't have a single accountable leader. So I think that proposal just won't work.
Mr. Mayor, my follow-up question has to do with the fact that it comes after last week the governor called on you to redo the police department. I know that he's called on every police department in the state to come up with new plans by next year, but he basically said that in order to restore community police relations, you have to start with a blank sheet of paper and come up with a new way of doing things. Is this proposal from the Attorney General a new way of doing things that you would adopt, or are there other ideas that you would consider to try to reestablish that relationship, that crucial relationship between the police and the community?
Yeah, Marcia, I would just have a different view from the beginning of this discussion. For 7 years, we've been instituting neighborhood policing. And I've been out in our communities. I've done almost 70 town hall meetings in our communities. I've talked to thousands and thousands of New Yorkers. And what I have heard is people want to have a better and trusting relationship with police officers, and police officers want to have that relationship with communities. And that's what neighborhood policing has been about, and it has worked in so many ways. And the fact that there are still problems should not blind us to the fact that a lot of progress has been made and must be continue to be made. So I look at it very differently. New York City, we didn't, with all due respect to the governor, we didn't need him or anyone else to tell us to reform our police department. We've been doing it for 7 years straight, and it's having a huge impact. And the fact is, we're going to build more and more trust through a series of actions. Look, I am absolutely convinced that as we continue to look at every reform and talk to communities about what they need, and look very bluntly at any issues of systemic racism in the NYPD or any other agency and break it down very publicly, very openly, it's going to build trust in this city because people see change happening before their very eyes. So I'm confident that what we've been doing over these last 7 years is only a beginning, and we're going to do a lot more, and it's going to work.
Next, we have Rich Lamb from WCBS 880.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Rich, how you doing?
I'm okay. So the governor yesterday said that he will make a decision on the schools in August. Is that too late?
Rich, I want to just say our job is always to respond to the needs of our people. And when the Department of Education got survey results from 400,000 parents saying we need school open, it's our job to make that happen and do it safely. So we're going and doing the hard work to get ready. And we'll be ready in any situation. What we all need to know is exactly what the data tells us, not only the beginning of August and the beginning of September. And we're going to watch that data and make our ultimate decisions based on it. So, no, I think the fact is we've been doing this work for months now. We're going to be ready for any eventuality. We have to be responsible for our own situation because this is what we do. We know best our own people, our own schools, and we'll be ready.
Rich, do you have
Okay,
a
just
follow-up?
follow up on the same topic. So it was indicated yesterday that some children will be going to school 1 day per week. Is there any percentage associated with that? How many kids will be going 1 day a week, and how is that possibly fair in any way?
Yeah, Rich, it's a great question. I appreciate it. So let me give you sort of the lay of the land. We have about 1,800 schools, and they all vary in terms of size, and they all vary in terms of how many kids are in the building in normal times. Some of our school buildings are really overcrowded, and that's where we're obviously going to a lot of effort to create new school space. And that will be going on for years and years. Other buildings are not crowded at all. In fact, some of our school buildings are very undersubscribed. So it really depends on the building and the number of kids who normally go to the school. The typical situation, I'd say the vast majority, will be kids going to school either 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And then the other days they would be doing the remote learning. There are some cases on either end of the spectrum, Rich. Some schools that are so overcrowded normally that they're going to have to do, 3 shifts in effect during the week, which means since there's only 5 days in a week, on some weeks a kid might only be in school once a week and other weeks twice a week. That's for the most overcrowded schools. On the other end of the spectrum, the schools that are the least overcrowded, you have a scenario there. It is even conceivable in some schools that kids could be in school all 5 days in the week if they're spaced. Remember, the crucial thing is the math here of social distancing. And it also refers back to Bridget's earlier question. The difference now compared to February, compared to March, everything's going to be socially distanced in the school building. That means you can only have a limited number of kids in the classroom. That's going to dictate how many times per week a child is there. But if there's enough space in at least a handful of schools, you're going to see kids there potentially 5 days a week.
Next, we have Gloria from New York 1.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask you a question regarding a report that my colleague Courtney Gross did yesterday, showing that some of the data that the city has in terms of people who were released early from Rikers did not, in fact, end up being rearrested at the same rate that the NYPD was claiming in the past few days in order to explain the increase in violence. I wondered if you could once again just speak to the messaging that we have seen from your NYPD in the last couple of days, and this data that today is showing that their messaging is somewhat flawed behind the uptick in violence.
Sure. Gloria, look, I think what the leaders of the NYPD are saying is there's a lot of different pieces hitting here. In fact, Commissioner Shea said the other day, I think on your station, that there's been a perfect storm of factors. Everyone has their own interpretation, and that's normal, and that's human. I'll tell you mine. I think the overwhelming reality is that the absence of a functioning criminal justice system, the fact that the courts are not functioning anywhere near what they normally would, the fact that there are not the kind of levels of gun prosecutions that we need, the fact that there's so much disruption in people's lives, lost jobs, kids can't be in school, so much trauma. I think that is what is causing a lot of what we see. I do not believe that the folks who were released from Rikers for health reasons are the central reality here. I don't believe that at all, and I'm the person who authorized that release. So sometimes we're going to have differences of interpretation, but I do believe the commissioner's been clear that there are many, many factors here. And I can tell you what I believe. I believe those much bigger factors are what's underlying the challenges we're facing.
Thank you. And I had a question on a separate topic. On terms of the cooling plan, some of what the reporting has been showing recently is that there are still a lot of questions about how the virus can be transmitted through things like air filtration systems, HVAC systems. What is the city doing to look at the equipment in some of these cooling centers? And will it be required for them to make changes, or will the city be making changes so that they can operate safely?
Thank you very much. It's a great question, Gloria. So I'm just going to start and then see if Dr. Varma or Commissioner Criswell have anything they want to add. Look, first of all, very important to remember, a cooling center is a very temporary reality. Typically, someone is there, for a day or a part of a day, maybe several days in the daytime hours, but it's something that's used very occasionally. But absolutely, we want to make sure that the cooling systems are as clean and appropriate as they can be. And also, we're thinking of any and all measures we need to take to address this new data that we're getting, this new information we're getting from the scientific community. We're going to have more to say on that in the coming days. But it's a very good point to say we got to make sure that everything we do is as safe as humanly possible. Dr. Varma and then Commissioner Criswell, you want to add?
Yes, no, I think it's obviously we're concerned about any situations where people are indoors. And so I think the same recommendations that we've been providing before continue to apply. We want people to be, maintaining social distance. We want people to be wearing face coverings, especially if they are not able to maintain any social distance in those situations. And of course, all of the important considerations about hand hygiene and getting immediately tested if anybody has any symptoms.
Deanne, you want to add?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We've been working really closely with the Department of Health to make sure that we are providing a safe environment for New Yorkers. And so similar to what Dr. Varma had said, is we want to enforce, or we want to make sure that we are following those strict guidelines of wearing face coverings, keeping separation, the 6 feet between individuals, which is why we've reduced the capacity at our cooling centers, so we can follow those standard protocols that we ask everybody to do, every New Yorker to do every day. So again, working very closely with the Department of Health to make sure the centers that we do open are opening in a safe and healthy way so we can protect all New Yorkers.
Next, we have Gersh from Streets Blog.
How are you, Mr. Mayor, and everyone on the call?
How you doing, Gersh?
I'm good, thank you. Quick question. So, Mr. Mayor, I wonder if you could connect two dots for me that are confusing. So, nationwide, since the killing of George Floyd, there have been 66 incidents in which drivers have used their cars as weapons. Yet here in New York City, the NYPD has ringed its own station houses with barricades, while you've created open streets for restaurants that are barely protected because you decided to make the roadways closed to cars only for a few hours a week, so they can't be permanently protected. So can you reflect on A, when the NYPD will reopen the public roadways for public use, and B, why don't you make your open restaurant streets 24/7 so they could be properly secured?
Okay, two very different questions. Gersh, I think on the first point, again, I will get an update from the NYPD, but I think we have to make sure safety is obviously the central question here. There was a real issue around precincts a few weeks ago, and we saw it around the country, and it was really important to ensure everyone's safety. And I think the fact that our precincts were properly protected, everyone involved was properly protected, and our precincts mean something to our whole city and represent our whole city. I think that was important to do. What needs to be done from this point on and how it can be modified is a very fair question. I can get an update on what's going to happen with that, and certainly happy to come back to you on that. Vis-a-vis the open streets, again, I think the open streets have been overwhelmingly a success, overwhelmingly created in a way that has been safe. As we added the open restaurants program, it's been a tremendous success, but we've also seen some things we have to do to make them safer. The open restaurants exist on a wide range of streets. So there's including a lot of streets you would never close off, but that we can do the open restaurants on effectively. And where we combine them, we've combined them in the hours that we thought would be the times when people would use them the most and want to be at the restaurants the most. So I would say to the second part of your question about streets, look, we're having a good experience here. Something that we have tried that's really working and is going to cause, I think, a real re-examination for the future. I've said to you, the city's going to have to be more and more about mass transit in the future. That's a good thing. I'm pleased to see mass transit ridership is growing now faster than cars coming into Manhattan. That's a really good thing. But what we are learning from the open streets and the open restaurants is something really positive. What it means for the future, we have to carefully analyze, but I think it's showing us some new and powerful opportunities.
Next, we have Henry from Bloomberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no questions. They've been asked previously. Thank you.
Well, you, sir, are a gentleman, and we will give your space to someone else.
Next, we have Shant from the Daily News.
Yeah, good morning. I wanted to start by asking about some breaking news with the Supreme Court saying the president has to turn over tax and business records to a grand jury here in New York. What's your comment on that? And then I have a second question.
Sean, Donald Trump's the only public servant in America who thinks he can get away with withholding his financial disclosure. I mean, it's outrageous. All of us, all the time, provide our taxes, do these lengthy disclosures. We think it's normal. The public has a right to the information. But the guy who has massive business interests that are affected by the decisions of government has evaded for years giving out this basic information. It's been perverse, and I applaud. I didn't know they'd done that. I applaud the Supreme Court. Go ahead, Sean.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. Separately, I wanted to ask about how things are going between you and Commissioner Shea. We at the Daily News understand you had a tense phone call with him recently, which it sounded like you admonished the commissioner for his public criticism of the reforms you've been advocating, including like the chokehold ban. I was wondering if you can confirm that call and what the exact contents were. Also, yeah, just what are you saying to the commissioner? I know in public you're very supportive of him, but what are you saying to him while on the one hand you're pushing for reform, but on the other hand he and the rest of NYPD brass are just blasting the reforms?
Yeah, Sean, first of all, I appreciate you asking the question. I'm just going to remind you, when I tell you something doesn't exist, I really hope you will report it. Several times I've had a situation where reporters have said, oh, there was a meeting, there was a call, there was something. I said it literally didn't exist. So I don't know who your source is, but your source is wrong. I've had numerous conversations with the commissioner, including yesterday, where we talk about everything that's going on. And look, we understand. We don't agree on every single thing. That's normal. But we have had really productive conversations about how we're going to move forward in this city, both to address the safety challenges we're facing and to address the need for constant reform. You could get caught up in differences of wording, or you could look at the things that are actually happening. This commissioner himself decided it was time to disband the anti-crime unit because of the problems it was creating, despite very good work that was being done too, the problems it was creating between police and community. It was his decision. He brought it to me. I said, I agree with you. This is the kind of step we need to take. That happened. I don't think that got the attention it deserved in the middle of a lot of other issues, a profound change. This commissioner took what had been bluntly too slow a disciplinary process, and in recent weeks has shown that that process can move a lot more quickly, including the recent incident in the Rockaways with a chokehold in which it took only hours for the commissioner to announce a suspension. That is real progress. I give him a lot of credit for that. He has strong views on some of the issues that are affecting the city right now. And as I said in the earlier answer, I think he's right when he says we're experiencing a perfect storm. He and I may have differences of where we put the emphasis in the analysis. But I've told him I respect his view, and he's a very learned person in terms of policing. I'm going to respect his right to say it, but I'm also going to say what I believe, and we're going to move forward together. And I think that's healthy. So no, there's a very, very good working relationship, and it's not just now, it's been going on for 7 years.
Last two for today. Next we have Yoav from the city.
Hi, everyone. Mr. Mayor, I'm glad you brought up the disciplinary process. Yesterday, the CCRB had a meeting in which they revealed that there's a huge backlog of requests for body cam footage from the PD. They said there are 417 requests that have been made 3 months or longer ago. And they are asking for direct access to the footage like is done in other cities. I'm wondering if you support giving the CCRB direct, unfettered access to this footage, and what you're doing to facilitate them obtaining it from the NYPD.
Yeah, Yoav, look, I don't know the details of the backlog. I do want to say that the 3-month time frame you refer to has been in the middle of this crisis when personnel levels were thrown off. We had a huge number of people out sick, and obviously immense challenges that we're dealing with. So I don't want to overstate the reality of the backlog if it's related to the crisis. But again, I don't have all those facts. I'll find out. I want the CCRB process to work, and I want it to work quickly. So I'll look into what they are specifically requesting and how best to get them the information they need. But, again, I don't know the nuances, so I'll come back when I do. But the bottom line is I am a firm believer in the CCRB. I said to you, I was in this building the day the CCRB law was passed in the Dinkins administration after decades of fighting for it to happen in this city. It's such an important part of giving the public faith that there is accountability, and it has to function well, and it has to function fast. It has to function fast for the public, and officers deserve for it to function quickly as well. So I'll find out what's up with that and what we can do to improve that situation.
Yoav, do you have a follow-up?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I do. I wanted to follow up on Gloria's question about the police department, attributing the rise in shootings in part to the bail reform. Respectfully, it doesn't appear, we're not asking about differing interpretations. The question is, they're attributing the rise in part to bail reform, but their own data shows that only one person who was released under the state bail reform law since January 1st has been charged with a shooting, and this is out of 528 incidents. So it appears to be less a question of interpretation, but kind of misinformation that's being delivered publicly.
No, I disagree with that. Yoav, again, the world before March 1st and the world after. Before March 1st, a lot of different things were happening. And some of it was changes in law, some of it was decisions by DAs, but things were definitely happening that were affecting our overall situation. That's just fact, because we saw sudden changes in our crime statistics that didn't just fall from the sky. They had some kind of causal connection, but not to one thing, to numerous things happening. If you say, is it wrong to minimize this discussion to bail reform? Absolutely. It should not be minimized to bail reform. Bail reform was one of many factors. But then post March 1st, overwhelmingly, it's about the coronavirus and all the dislocation it's caused. So again, there are differences of interpretation. I believe that the much truer interpretation is to look at all of the factors and the particularly central role of the coronavirus and what's happened in recent weeks, and to recognize we're going to have to fight that back systematically with a lot of community engagement and constantly address the underlying causes. But to me, we should be honest, and when you have a perfect storm, you have a perfect storm, and that's what we're dealing with right now.
Last question for today. We have Jillian Jonas from WBAI.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. How are you doing?
Good, Jillian. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. My first question has to do with the broadband plan you announced Tuesday, I believe. Some of the poorest New Yorkers in the city are seniors and the disabled, many of whom don't live in the targeted communities or in NYCHA complexes. Rather, they live in private housing, with seniors comprising the majority of tenants living in rent-controlled apartments. Both groups live throughout the city. What are the details to include them and when?
Yeah, Jillian, excellent question. Thank you. So our internal task force, our task force on racial inclusion and equity, is focused on 27 neighborhoods that have been hardest hit by the coronavirus, that have experienced the disparities most deeply, communities of color that have really not experienced fairness in the city. And the goal of the task force is to systematically, right now, figure out policy changes that can make an impact. A whole bigger effort is coming behind that with the commission that we're putting together on racial justice and reconciliation to systematically and officially in the next 18 months identify where there is systematic racism in every city agency and every city institution, name it, identify it, catalog it, and then attack it and tear it down with real immediate policy changes, budget changes, you name it. But this one is about reaching 600,000 people. That is not everyone we need to reach. But it will be, there's a heavy, heavy focus on public housing because we have the ability to have a lot of impact in a public housing development, effectively, efficiently. It's not just public housing. You're absolutely right about low-income seniors suffering in many ways the most. But I want to say that I think not only will we reach a certain number of low-income seniors through this first initiative, but this is only a beginning. Both the task force and the commission are going to look at the digital divide and talk about much more profound ways to address it. And one of the things we must do is get that legislation passed in Albany that we talked about a couple of days ago, Deputy Mayor Thompson talked about, that would force the internet companies to pay for the use of city property and use that money to address the digital divide. Go ahead.
Okay. It's not a follow-up. It's unrelated. About that Brooklyn building that exploded last week, it had a partial stop work order issued by the Department of Buildings in June, and the landlord had a history of failing to maintain the building up to code, level 1 violations. It was cited for structural cracks and buckling walls last year, but witnesses say they saw evidence of this even recently. Yet the owner only paid a $3,000 fine in October and a total of about $11,000 over 2 years of failing to maintain the code. The DOB has a dubious reputation as being one of the city's most dysfunctional agencies. It's very reactive, and the paltry fines are often written off as the cost of doing business. When you add the budget cuts that are coming and the new responsibility of the post-COVID safety measures, how effective do you think DOB can be in cracking down on an industry that often disregards the law and can affect basically life and death with building and construction safety?
I appreciate that question a lot. I think it's a very thoughtful question, Jillian. And it's the kind of thing that doesn't get enough attention. So in this case, I've spoken with Commissioner LaRocca about what happened here, and I want to get a full report on, since DOB was dealing with this site, what was done and what we can learn from this and what needs to be different going forward, because I don't want to see anything like this happen. And I want the Department of Buildings to be as aggressive as possible. You're right to say DOB has a lot of different responsibilities right now. We have to be smart about that to not lose focus for some of the historic health and safety issues while dealing with the new health and safety issues around the coronavirus. But I do think in the essence of your question is 2 points. One, I want the DOB to be able to issue the kinds of fines that will really hurt people who own real estate and abuse that privilege. I don't want it to be the kind of fines that could be chalked up to the cost of doing business. I think this has been a huge problem in New York City government for decades. The fine structures just don't relate to reality. On some fronts, we've been able to increase fines intensely, and that helps. We got a lot more to do. So I can certainly assure you we're going to come back with ways of making sure that anyone who puts the public safety at risk for profit has to face much more dire consequences. And sometimes, Jillian, that means criminal charges, which is something DOB has been working on more and more with district attorneys, with the Attorney General's office. And I think in some cases, the criminal charges are the way to go, and we have to show that that kind of consequence exists. The other piece is the department itself. The commissioner has done a lot to change the DOB, and she's very, very anti-bureaucratic, to her great credit. So I think that we should not assume that what used to be at the DOB will continue to be. I think a lot of changes are happening. They have to happen. It has to become a much more modern agency. But it has to be an agency that is willing to be very aggressive in dealing with anyone who will put the public safety at risk. All right, everybody. As we conclude, I just want to say this, and it really harkens back to this extraordinarily challenging and painful and difficult, but also in many, many ways, triumphant fight that New Yorkers have waged against the coronavirus. Do not let anyone mistake the fact that all the progress we have made over 4 months is because of all of you, because people have fought so hard. Sometimes I find an effort out there to minimize what New Yorkers have done. You just have to look around the country to understand that this was because New Yorkers devoted themselves to to fighting back this disease that we've come as far as we've come. You heard the indicators today. You've heard them for weeks on end. That's because people have shown real commitment and discipline. Every time someone tells you, oh, I saw someone not wearing a face covering, how about all the times the people are wearing the face covering? How about when our colleague from the media, Andrew Siff, called in from the 7 train and said he was counted the number of people in the subway car and 22 out of 23 were wearing a face covering. That's in part because we've been giving out free face coverings in the subways and all over the city. And people are doing something about it. They're really working hard to keep each other safe. So when Annabelle Palma talked about the effort to reach out to the grassroots and educate people, engage people, that's the way forward. We need to do everything we're supposed to do here at City Hall, but the real way of fighting this battle and winning this battle is by engaging the people fully, because New Yorkers have it in them to beat back this virus. And so we're going to win on the ground at the grassroots where real change is made. And I want to thank everyone who is part of this fight. It's working. Let's stick with it. Let's keep winning together. Thank you, everybody.